few years ago I was in a church where a young curate was preaching, and he had a brilliant idea. He went to the local chocolate shop and got a massive chocolate egg. It had to be big because it was a city centre congregation and there were about 800 people there. And he thought that it would be a really good idea to smash this egg and demonstrate that there was enough for everybody, which isn't really the Easter message, but it was as close as he was going to get that day. Unfortunately, what happened was he invited the children to go and get some chocolate. And the big fast kids got armfuls of chocolate, and the little slow ones ended up with none. It was, for me, my nightmare Easter day sermon. It didn't work, and it gave the wrong message entirely. So I began to do some research on what we preach at Easter. Being a preacher, that's what I do. And one person said to me, rather horrifyingly, "Oh, you don't need to bother what the reading says, just tell them the Easter story." Well, without the reading, there is no Easter story, is there? So the reading I decided to work with was the one that we've just had, and I'm going to read you the sermon that I produced based on that sermon, which is in the first of my books, Preaching Women, because it seemed to me that we don't give Mary enough attention. It's finished. That's what Jesus had said just 2 days ago. It is finished. And his life was finished. His work was finished. His mission to the world to break through human hardness, human pride, human insistence on religion that had little to do with God was finished. It was finished. The expert executioners had already beaten him. They knew from years of experience when a person was dead. And this one was definitely finished. So when Mary went to the tomb 2 days later, she went without hope. She went to tend a dead friend, to do the very last thing that she could do for the dead one that she had followed. He was gone. Perhaps she began to realise that although to Jesus she was someone, a person worth listening to, a person to work with and to walk with, that too was finished. She was once again the woman from whom demons had been cast out. The woman who down through history was to be remembered as a woman of ill repute rather than a woman of courageous faith. The tomb was her focus, a place to remember, a place to grieve, a place of death. But when she got to the tomb, it was a tomb no longer. The stone was rolled back. The body was gone. The tomb was broken open. She ran to Peter and to the nameless disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. Her concern was the tomb. Not only had they taken Jesus' life, they'd taken his body too. Now it really was all finished. The disciples ran, they focused on the tomb too. And the disciple Jesus loved got there first. He looked and saw strips of cloth. Not quite an empty tomb, but nothing to entice him in. Peter, though, impetuous Peter, ran inside. Maybe for him it was already finished. He'd misunderstood Jesus so many times. At the last, when Jesus needed a friend, Peter had denied ever knowing him. On this, the first day of the week, he entered a place of death and became unclean himself. Touching death meant that you couldn't come before God without making a sacrifice, but Peter went inside because probably he already felt there was a gulf between himself and God. His grief for Jesus was mixed with horror at himself, and something inside him had died too. Finally, the other disciple entered the tomb. He saw the abandoned grave clothes. He believed, we're told, although we don't know what he believed, of course, and he hadn't understood. Perhaps in the context of the times, he believed that Jesus had become a god, like some of the Roman emperors had become after death. Perhaps he thought Jesus had been a god, pretending to be human, as happened in some mythology. But it was finished, so he and Peter returned home. Jesus was dead, the body was gone, there was nothing more to be done. But Mary hangs around. Maybe she just wants to feel close to Jesus. Maybe there remains inside her some hidden, flickering flame of hope. Somehow or other, she wants to be close to her Lord. It's probably something that we've all done. I know I have. You go to a particular place to remember someone special or to feel close to them somehow. For Mary, the tomb isn't the point. Being close to Jesus is. And when the angels ask why she's praying, it all tumbles out. She's looking for Jesus. Whatever she might think, Mary doesn't know. And it's in her not knowing that she sees. When the men looked into the tomb, they saw evidence. No body, empty grave clothes. When Mary looks in, she sees angels. When Mary looks into the tomb, it's already sanctified. And while she's looking into a sanctified grave, someone approaches her. Someone who is wandering the garden. He asks the same question. Why are you crying? He goes a step further. Who are you looking for? And Mary gives more or less the same answer. She's looking for Jesus. And then he says her name. From the very depths of darkness, the little light of hope begins to burn brighter, and then bursts into radiant flame. Jesus says her name. He knows her. He's here in this moment for her. The one she mourns, the dead one, is fully, completely, vibrantly alive. Joy and delight thrill through her veins. Her mind is on fire, her heart burns. The world is wonderfully, completely, radiantly changed. It will never, it can never be the same again. Life has burst out of the grave. Life in all its fullness has filled the world. In uttering the one word, her name, Jesus has told Mary all that she needs to know in order to worship. Life has invaded the tomb. Remembering is about resurrection, not death. Grief is infused with joy. Death is defeated. Mary wants to hold on to Jesus, of course she does, to make him hers, the Lord once dead, now alive. But Jesus cannot be held. He's not hers. He's not ours. It's not her task, or ours, to pin Jesus down, to define him or to explain him, to understand him. It is her task, and it's ours, to release him into the world, to go and to tell. And why would we not? This is
not an idea that can be explained or a doctrine to be taught. This is a new world, a new way of living, a new era in which life, not death, is the natural order. On that morning, many years ago, the tomb was open and death was broken. Recreation burst out like water from a geyser, like a newborn baby being pushed into the world, and nothing could hold him. And now we live in a world where the life revolution has begun. We live in a world where God is filling the place and places, love is pushing out hate, and light is shining out. Darkness and death cannot beat it, change it, hide it, or stop it. It is finished. Easter Day is the day that shocked the world, and it still does. Easter Day is the day when the world was invaded with resurrection life, and it still is. We see one final thing in Mary. Life's invasion of death, God's invasion of the world, happens through Jesus' followers. The invasion is to go on through Jesus' disciples. Even in the joy of meeting her risen Lord, Mary had a task. Go and tell. It's a task that we share. We also are to go and to tell.